So as we look at sort of our numbers for this week, so in the video that I was talking about before, um, for last week's video, I was thinking about uh, I gave it a pretty big spread between I think about 20 and $40 million for Borderlands, but shockingly, we weren't that close at all. Um, and we'll talk about that in a little bit here because I actually went to go see Borderlands, and boy, was it a stinker! And we'll talk a little bit about why. So Deadpool again has the top spot with $54 million. Officially worldwide, they're over $1 billion, which is the highest R-rated movie in the world, or in terms of history. So the that's great. So that's a great win for the Walt Disney Studios, who's had a lot of blockbusters or a lot of slumps in terms of blockbusters. Now, the interesting thing with this is Ryan Reynolds' wife, Blake Lively, comes up with the second movie. It Ends With Us, $50 million. So no one saw this one coming either. It's sort of, in some sense, people were comparing it to Barbie and Oppenheimer when they came out, to that type of effect. And Ryan Reynolds is really good at marketing, and so I think that had some of it to play into it. But we'll talk a little bit in a couple moments why I think it also is something that we as screenwriters should look at, and why it's important for us to look at these type of things from time to time to see what the audience are looking for. Twisters still doing pretty good. So anything again under 50% means it's not a significant drop in the box office. So it's still doing good. It's been 4 weeks in, and it actually did better than Borderlands with $15 million. It's not as good as it hasn't taken as much money in as the original Twister. So some of the reason for that is probably not everybody knows what a twister is. In different parts of the world, tornadoes and typhoons and hurricanes are all sort of indistinguishable from each other. So people don't really understand that. And so it actually has done better domestically than it has internationally, which makes sense. Borderlands, remember I said 20 to 40? 8.8 million. Ouch. Lionsgate Films, you really sucked on that one. So Despicable Me 4, again, really good. 8 million. So they're at $330 million in terms of a box office. Trap, 56.5. Again, we saw that coming in that it wasn't a very good movie. It's still going to make its money back. It's about 28. It only cost them about $30 million, and they didn't do a lot of publicity and stuff like that. So I doubt it was about $60 million, including publicity. I think it was a lot less. So even though it's a bad movie and M. Night Shyamalan isn't making a lot of money from it, he's going to make enough to make his money back, maybe a little bit of a profit with it, especially when it gets out in the streaming. The next movie, Inside Out 2, still doing great, 27.2%, 4.9 million. It's made a total gross of $636 million, which is just awesome. Harold and the Purple Crayon continue to fall, $12 million. It's been a really underperforming picture for Columbia Pictures. Cuckoo, I don't really know a lot about this particular one. Came in with $3 million. I think it's another horror movie that's come out. So we'll see what kind of legs it's got on it. Speaking of legs, Long Legs rounds out the top 10 with a $2 million box office, making $71 million. And this film didn't cost them that much to begin with. So they're making lots of profit on this. So this is all really cool stuff within the box office. I wasn't thinking that Long Legs would be able to stick around, but they're doing good. Quiet Place Day One has jumped out of the top 10, which we're not surprised with because it's now on digital. And the rest of the stuff is where it is at right now too. So cool. So let's talk a little bit more about these movies. I'm going to pull up a Hollywood Reporter article because I think that'll help stitch some insights into what's going on. So if we take a look at the Hollywood article here. So Lively Reynolds box office domination. Deadpool and Wolverine stays number one with 54 million and Ends With Us soars to a huge $50 million opening weekend. And so, like I said, we can see here that the total overall with Wolverine and stuff has 494.3 million over in terms of the domestic box office, but overseas $535 million. Global worldwide haul of 1.02, which surpasses Joker. So woohoo! So the other thing, as we look at the second film, It Ends With Us. It's a Sony picture. And the reason why I think this one did so well is if we look down a little bit farther into the article here, most of the people who saw this were women. And so it really showcases what when women want to see a film, how they'll come out to see it. Because I remember hearing from one of the other YouTube, Grace from Inside Hollywood was talking. She went to see this particular movie, and she was not a big fan of it, but she said it was good for the people who were there. But she saw a lot of people there who normally wouldn't go to a movie, and so this movie actually brought a lot of women out into the theaters and stuff like that. So it also had a really good cinema score and a high percentage of audience score on Rotten Tomatoes as well, too. So people really like this movie. So the other thing that's interesting about this that Hollywood seems to forget from time to time is that movies based on books tend to do pretty good. Not always. It depends on the book adaptation, but it happens. And so if you have a good book, you tend to get good followers from the book, and you have a good plot, you have a good story. And so it's not surprising that this particular book did well. Ticket buyers, it's right here. Ticket buyers for it ends with us were 84% female, spread across all adult age groups. So again, it really shows that when a demographic within the society is sort of ignored in terms of movie making stuff, that when there's a film that they really resonate with, they will go out and support it. And so, like I said, there hasn't been a lot of films aimed at women. And so this one was basically aimed at women. And you can see the result, $50 million on the opening weekend. And I think you're going to see a very strong box office. I don't think it's going to fall. I think it's going to probably be about 30 million. I think you're going to have a very strong box office for the next week or two, because I don't think there's anything in the box. Well, as we'll see in a moment, nothing is going to be coming up that is really going to dethrone it for quite a while in terms of something else that women would want to go see. So this is the first of Hoover's books, which was adapted for the big screen. The film was directed by Bondoli and cost a modest $25 million to produce before marketing. They've already made their money back, folks. So this is the one thing that I think Hollywood needs to look at too. There's a lot of good dramas. There's a lot of good human interest movies like this. And if they would just go about not having these big budgeted movies, you can still make a lot of money back. You know, if we looked at the box office for this past week, like I said, we look at Long Legs. That costs I think it was less. I think it was about $10 million to make, and they're making they've made $70 million, which is a huge increase. And I think studios need to get away from some of these big blockbuster tentpole movies and support some of these movies that people are going to want to watch as well. And not everybody wants to watch car chases and action scenes like that. Not that those are bad, but you can also make a lot of money doing films that people also find interesting that don't always involve car chases and stuff like that. So I thought that was really interesting. 8.8 million. That is depressing. And so the Hollywood Reporter says another nationwide entry was Lionsgate's big budget Borderlands, which bit the dust in opening at 8.8 million. I was part of that money. Behind already muted projections, despite a star-studded cast including Cate Blanchett, Kevin Hart, Jamie Lee Curtis, Jack Black, Rena Greenblatt, and Florin, and I can't pronounce her last name. Directed by Eli Roth, the video game adaptation, which cost north of $110 million to produce, was roundly panned by critics. Audiences felt the same in slapping it with a D+ on Cinema Score. Lionsgate's insiders say the studio losses will be minimized by selling off international rights. Yeah. So as we look at the box office numbers again, I think the big thing to take away from these numbers is, again, what our audience is looking for. And so generally, I know during the fall, I'm going to pull up my box office numbers here again, because I think it's important for us to look at. Let's make sure there we go. So I think it's important here as a screenwriter to sort of say, okay, so what's the trends here? What trends should we need to be paying attention to as a screenwriter in terms of what kind of movies we should be writing? Now, always we should be writing movies that we find interesting, that we tell the stories that we need to tell, the compelling stuff like that. At the end of the day, so here's some interesting things too. So we found out that It Ends With Us. Again, it's a movie based on a book, and so that if you have a good book that people like, you have a built-in audience, you have that IP that Hollywood execs want, if you can buy the rights to the book and create the screenplay on that, there you go. That's a winning formula, because like I said, we see that with Ends With Us. Now, again, Twisters is built on a previous IP. Like I said, I'm still really surprised at how well that did. But if you look in terms of box office wise, if we look at the other movies that have come out, it's really one of the only disaster movies that's really there. And so that's probably why it's been doing so well. There hasn't been a lot of disaster movies released recently. In some sense, you could call it a disaster movie as well as a monster movie, because the Twisters could be considered monsters, and so we haven't had a really good monster movie come out recently. So then let's take a look at Borderlands again. So Borderlands, the movie was really bad. I went to see that with my son. It was really, really pretty awful. And people are like, well, it's a video game. What do you expect? They've actually done video games pretty well. Mario Brothers has been out recently. I think Borderlands brings us back to the time back in the 80s and early 90s when video game movies weren't as good. And I think you really see that. It really felt like a play-by, or it didn't even feel like that they knew that they were doing. I mean, it just was really, the characters were really flat. And I'll save a little bit more of this for the pop culture stuff, but just the scenes didn't feel like they were going anywhere. So generally when you're writing a scene, you want it to lead to the next scene, and you want to know what's going to happen next. I can tell you, when I watched the movie, I didn't really care what happened next. And to me, that's bad writing. So that I'm not drawn to that next scene. I'm not saying, okay, what's going to happen next? I wasn't really interested. I wasn't really invested. Now, to be fair, though, I also saw a lot of reviews saying this was a crap movie. And so maybe some of that fed into my feelings when I was watching the movie. But it was also funny, too. Borderlands is also well known for its humor and stuff like that. And I got a couple people snickering from time to time, too. But there was no full-on laughs. And like I said, a lot of the jokes felt really, really flat. So as we take a look at in terms of box office for the rest of the week here. So if we look at trends again that we're looking for, again, family movies are doing pretty good. So even though Harold and the Purple Crayon aren't doing great, they still pulled in. They're still hanging on there in the second week with. You can see there's a couple family movies out there, which is not surprising since we are in the middle of summer. So I think that's a pretty good thing. So if you're looking for especially something to release in the summer, look for a family movie. We saw how well a family movie like Inside Out did when it can reach adults as well as children. You see that with the $636 million gross with the Minions. You see it when it just hits kids, and it hits kids well. You see 330 million. When you see it didn't hit adults as well, that's why it's not as good as Inside Out 2 in terms of the box office. The other thing too, horror movies still doing good. They either seem to really hit really well or they really do not. So yes, Longlegs is doing it really well and Cuckoo is not. Like I said, thinking ahead for the box office for next week, I think you're going to see Deadpool and Wolverine. I'm going to make the claim that they're going to be below It Ends With Us in terms of the box office. I think It Ends With Us is going to be about 30 million box office. I think Deadpool and Wolverine is going to slip to 25 million. And Twisters will slip again to about 7.5 million. Borderlands, if it makes 4 million more next week, I will be shocked. I think it'll maybe make $3 million next week, if that, maybe 2. It'll be interesting to see if it even falls out of the top 10. I don't know. It's just really bad.